Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hi, everybody. This is Brett. Welcome back to the Online Great Books podcast. This is part two in Scott and Karl's discussion of Unrestricted Warfare, an extremely relevant book. I think you could say that during any time in the era of modern warfare. In fact, even more generally, I find myself saying that about anything that directly or indirectly issued some kind of warning about the future in the past. Like, oh yeah, this has become a lot more relevant in the last 5 years, and really even more so in the last 18 months. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. In fact, the frustrating and foreboding nature of this content actually leads to, I'm pretty sure, the first walk-off in Online Great Books history. A walk-off is where one participant actually leaves before the show is over. Is that true? Am I lying to you like I did last week about how fun this would be? Or are there other circumstances involved? You'll have to listen to the end to find out. I only wound the conversation back about 30 seconds, so this is pretty much all new material. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Here we go.
And if this book is right about this, which I think it's clear that it's right, you can see that it makes sense for the current segregation and balkanization into people groups, into interest groups, because it's war of all against all, if that's the case. And you need to have some all with you in order not to be compelled so hard. So people that organize and march and burn stuff down, their interests get recognized.
No, it's just what it is.
It makes sense. Not even mad. Yeah, I like this line on 51. The supercilious Americans often engage in actions which cause them to reflect on their mistakes. And this disposition, which would seem to be a contradiction, time and again amazes those who want to witness the presumptuous Americans suffering.
Well, and then the next line, at the same time, it also enables the Americans to time and again reap considerable benefits.
Yeah, that's the reflexive nature of, I think it's the reflexive nature of Western culture. I think that's kind of one of the keys to our canon, is it's always looking back on itself and saying, are we right?
The observations about the U.S. are one of the most interesting things about the book, like that one. At the bottom of 52, the authors talk about the DOD Reorganization Act, which was passed just prior to the Gulf War. And the authors say that a law which had not been in effect for 5 years could be implemented so thoroughly in a war that came along at the same time must be attributed to the contractual mentality of the people in the legal society represented by the United States. Other people won't follow rules like that, is what he's saying.
Yeah, they're impressed.
And also not. I think they're very fair-minded in that way, though, Karl, don't you?
Yeah, this is I saw the cover, and it's kind of marketed as Unrestricted Warfare, secret book by Chinese colonels. And you're like, this is going to be some anti-American manifesto or something. And it's not. It's a military manual, and it's even-handed. It's like, this is how you have to do it.
So this book was largely born out of an analysis of the Gulf War. And it's got a really interesting analysis of that war in here. I'm sure there are people that, various military schools and training that think we're doing this wrong, and they're right. But what am I going to do about it? It says here, upwards of 98 press conferences were held throughout the entire course of the Gulf War, and people saw images of how the precision-guided missiles could penetrate the air vents in a building and explode, of Patriots intercepting Scuds and numerous other shots, et cetera, et cetera. They write in here.
I remember that.
I do too. We watched it. I was still in school. We watched it at school. And they talked in here about how they controlled media coverage of this war. And I wrote here in the margin. And the authors claim there is a military necessity to use global media to influence perceptions of that war, to demoralize the enemy, and to make your people think you're winning. That's a military necessity here for these authors. And so I wrote, if that's the case, how does the U.S. public know how to vote?
Yeah. So, but we're free, right? If you remember way back when, I was born in 71, so I was 20 or 21 when this thing was happening. I had some friends that went to it. One of them came back pretty different. Wouldn't talk about what they did. But the whole media was on board with this.
Oh.
I remember the Super Bowl when Whitney Houston lip-synced her way through the Star-Spangled Banner.
How dare you?
Well, she did.
Oh.
It's a wonderful arrangement. It's got some cool modulations and stuff, but she didn't sing it live. And the whole nation is like, USA, USA. Just all on board with this war. And probably the last time that's going to happen. I don't know how we would do it again as this current nation, but it was really an interesting time. How about this for throwing a bomb? It's like the closest to fascist Italy. You know, everybody cheering Mussolini that you're going to have. And it was George H.W.
Yeah. Everybody was wearing the support our troops shirts. It was pretty gross.
If the media, which was ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN at that time, were all on the same page on the war because they decided that it was a good war, or whoever runs them decided that it was, aren't they all on the same page on other things? And if it was a tool to help the United States win, to make the Iraqis fear, you know, it would appear, I'm reading, it would appear that in all future wars, in addition to the basic method of military strikes, the force of the media will increasingly be another player in the war and will play a role comparable to that of military strikes in promoting the course of the war. All right, so if the media, as these Chinese authors argue, was a weapon of war in Gulf War I, when did they stop being a weapon of war?
Yeah. Karl, you and your questions. Yeah, that reflectiveness that the Americans have comes into play here, because he says that they learned their lesson in Vietnam. You know, these television news crews were bringing back images from Vietnam, which ultimately cost them the war. You know, after learning that lesson, they tightly controlled coverage of the Gulf War.
If you're a U.S. president, I don't think you can get into a war unless you have the media.
Yeah.
You won't win it.
Yeah. Well, you won't win it anyway, apparently. So if it's a military necessity to do that, and I believe that it is, Karl, like let's say we get into a just war with Trudeau's government.
Damn Canadians. Sorry,
a just war. We need to win a just war with the least loss of life.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to use these media tools to do that, which means who knows what that means exactly. But our voters aren't going to be getting the information they need to vote properly and to operate some sort of representative government. Like representative government is incompatible with the unlimited nature and unrestricted nature of modern warfare. There you go. It's been a great show.
Yeah, so if you don't have this theory of representative government requires the people to actually know some truth in order to be able to vote according to that truth. If the media is a weapon of war, as it certainly was in 1991, then it's always a weapon of war, I think. How do you know when you're being warred upon?
You know,
somebody famous said, there's a war on for your mind. I think that's probably right. It's thankfully, I guess, it's not a shooting war.
Maybe.
I don't know. There's a sense. If you're in high school and there's which would you rather have? Would you rather have the bully punch you in the face where you might be able to defend yourself, or at least you knew who he was?
Or just never be happy?
Or have a whispering campaign done against you that completely destroys you and your reputation, but you don't even know who's doing it? I'd rather get punched in the face and lose, maybe, and be the coward of the county or whatever. But there's less bloodshed this way.
Page 61. About this media deception. Based on information that was disclosed following the war, this being the first Gulf War, The reason that the ground war abruptly came to a halt after 100 hours was actually because Bush, influenced by a hasty assessment of the course of the war that was issued on television by a battlefield news release officer, later came to a similarly hasty decision of his own, dramatically shortening the time from strategic decision-making to concluding the war. He watched the television.
Mm-hmm. It was reflexive. His own media influenced him.
Okay, so there's an end note here, number 12. I'm going to go back and read this. So I'm going to give him the citation here. U.S. Army Field Manual FM 100-6, Information Operations discloses the details of this dramatic event, pages 68 and 69. The television news reports on the expressway of death also had an effect on the overly early conclusion of the war.
So Bush lost his nerve.
Because of a news report.
He should have known better. He was the head of the CIA.
That disqualifies him from understanding anything.
Don't you know they're listening, Scott?
Yep, I do know. The next chapter I thought was stupid. What do Americans gain by touching the elephant? We've all heard this story about the blind people that, get to touch a part of an elephant and describe it. One grabs the trunk and thinks it's one thing, and the other one grabs the tail and thinks it's another thing. It's a tortured, stupid analogy in here.
I don't know. There's some interesting stuff that the bombs that we drop cost more than the targets.
Yeah. Page 74, the illness of extravagance and zero casualties. They essentially say there's no regard for an ROI, a weapon cost versus target value among the United States military. Seems right. I'm sure there's some regard, and I'm sure there's somebody, some military guys listening that's screaming otherwise, but,
So let me read some quotes here. It's interesting. This is a foreign power commenting on us. This is page 75. Of all the soldiers in the world, this is describing some huge expense. Basically, in Gulf War I, it was like moving the population of Jackson, Mississippi to Saudi Arabia and building Jackson in Saudi Arabia. Of all the soldiers in the world, probably only the Americans consider this a necessary extravagance in order to win one war. A little further down, what you must know about Americans is that this is a nationality that has never been willing to pay the price of life and moreover has always vied for victory at all costs. Well, I don't know about the never, but certainly now. Ever since the Vietnam War, both the military and American society have been sensitized to human casualties during military operations almost to the point of morbidity. We care too much about our soldiers' lives to actually conduct these sorts of things. So, and then they make a point on 76, and don't be mad, don't hate the players, hate the game. All of the opponents who have engaged in battle with the American military have probably mastered the secret of success. If you have no way of defeating this force, you should kill its rank-and-file soldiers, because we will lose heart and go home. IEDs, I can't remember what that stands for. Improvised explosive device. It's not going to win you any military victories.
Or will it?
You're not going to win a conventional battle with those. But you might win the war. Gosh, who was that guy? He used to be at 70s Big, which was a weightlifting website. Got his legs and testicles blown off by one of those. So now he's home with no legs and, no bits and pieces. Things like that make us leave.
Yeah. And one of the reasons they don't get this, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but one of the reasons for that is we actually don't fight just in compelling wars. Like, we might be willing to screw around in Afghanistan as long as there's just like an invoice for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if there's people in my church that are going there and getting blown up.
Right. Because we really don't know what Americans will do if there's a real war, like a just war that's compelling to everyone.
So your strategy then, if you're an opponent of the United States, is not to give them
Never
that.
give them that. Yeah.
If you're the bully, don't give the weaselly kid a straight-up fight. He might, come with a knife and actually win the thing. So never give him the conflict. Just whisper things about him.
Of Americans. of Americans, page 77. They believe that as long as the Edisons of today do not sink into sleep, the gate to victory will always be open to Americans. Self-confidence such as this has made them forget one simple fact. It is not so much that war follows the fixed race course of rivalry of technology and weaponry as it is a game field with continually changing direction and many irregular factors. Whether you wear Adidas or Nike cannot guarantee you will become the winner. Ooh, burn. Burn.
I think having these guys over for dinner would be fun. But you read this like, oh my gosh, we're never going to win again. Maybe this is psychological warfare against me. Having this book leaked and translated by Echo Press
how meta of you.
Is a psyop. Everything's a psyop. The problem is once you start looking for psyops, everything's a psyop. Even you looking for one is a psyop. And then there's nothing to do but take the black pill and plant potatoes.
It's true. Later in that What Do Americans Gain by Touching the Elephant chapter, he talks about, the authors write about a 1993 U.S. Army publication, The Essentials of War. If the concept of total dimensional warfare had not been set forth in the 1993 Army publication, The Essentials of War, we would simply be astounded at the anemic realm of U.S. military thinking. So if it wasn't for both this one piece here, which apparently was some work that General Tommy Franks worked on, you know that guy's name now, they wouldn't be very impressed with the Americans at all. But in The Essentials of War, they were even less able to discover that, apart from war as military operations, there still exists the possibility for far vaster non-military war operations. However, it at least pointed out that total dimensional warfare should possess the special characteristics of total depth, total height, total frontage, total time, total frequency, and multiple methods. And this precisely is the most revolutionary feature of this form of battle that has never been seen in the history of war. The U.S. Army in 93 was starting to talk about this, and I mean, probably before, but at least in a public publication, they see mention of these ideas. Colonel Holder said that the belief that non-combat operations has its own set of principles is not welcomed among combat troops, and many commanding officers are opposed to differentiating between non-combat operations and the original meaning of military operations. So this is a very interesting problem of command. So you've got people who send projectiles downrange and kill people and break shit. Military. Mm-hmm. And then you've got people that are hacking or screwing with your currency or giving porn to the 10-year-olds at the opponent's camp. Who commands those groups?
How do you even command them? Limbaugh used to say the job of the military is to kill people and break things. You can figure out how to do that. You can set up a battalion to do that and do it effectively. How do you set it up to build an app to destroy the morals of another nation's youth?
Is that a CIA function? Like, where does that non-military warfare function lie in the chain of command?
Yeah, I mean, how would you even have I'm going to screw up the terms. All the military people who listen to us, thank you, by the way, are going to yell at me for this. But what's your squad look like? What's your division look like? I don't know which one's bigger. Division, battalion?
Yeah, it could be two, 14-year-olds. Hacking. No, seriously. Creating a shitcoin. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't know.
Shitcoin warfare. What is a shitcoin?
All of them now. All right, let me get my box.
Soapbox.
Crypto people are going to be irritated with me, Pat. Y'all are a bunch of dorks. So you got your blockchain, you see. And if a majority of nodes adopt a new crypto operating system, it'll fork. Right? It's distributed, but everybody has to sort of democratically agree to make something happen in a blockchain. Right, Carl? You're just giving me that dead-eyed, angry Carl face.
No, I'm looking at the Bitcoin price as you talk. I think as you talk, it's going down.
You know, I was thinking about that. I'm like, that's not that terribly hard to do, particularly if you don't have an economic interest. Like, if you're China, can you not buy, like, as many PCs as is necessary? Virtualize a number of them and, like, flip them all on at one instant and fork the thing?
Seems like it.
Seems like it. People say, oh.
All right. So think of it, dear listener, think of it in these terms. If the domain of warfare is unlimited, that includes cryptocurrency. So if there's a way to screw with it, it'll get screwed with, in order to compel your behavior to be what those who have the power to screw with it want it to be.
Right. And it could be that an actor could determine that the economic value of messing your crypto up exceeded the value of the crypto. Like market capitalization of your crypto is $2 trillion. Well, if destroying France was worth more than that, and that was in their interest to do that, then they might spend $4 trillion to do it, you see. Right? In this realm, the economic doesn't matter. You know, they talk about, I've read the Satoshi paper. I've been a crypto advocate. I get it. But if what these gentlemen say is true, then the economic concerns don't really matter. It's only about getting the other people to act according to your interest. And crypto relies on an economic concern. Oh, it's too expensive to find the nonce, and it's too expensive to break to break the cryptogram. It's too no. Listen, not everything's economic. Mm-hmm. If some software engineer with some hostile actor finds a way to, I don't know, complex up 150,000 PCs and break your 256-bit encryption, I don't know, or comes up with some new math that allows them to, instead of brute force it, to actually find the keys. It's all math, man. You just need a breakthrough, right? Don't tell me it's not impossible, because we do things right now mathematically that we thought were impossible. They can destroy it just to get their will. But you guys are just thinking of what is, not thinking of what could be. Like these people that want you hurt are thinking of what could possibly be in order to hurt you.
Well, as Kanye said, my memories are of the future.
That's probably right.
If you think about Gulf War I, it's a complete overspending. If we weren't the reserve currency, it would be ludicrous.
It's still ludicrous.
Well, we just make money out of the air. But to spend that much money to get some oil fields back in the hands of the emir or whoever it is in Kuwait, huge expense. I don't know. War makes me sad. Page 96, I think, maybe 98. Combination has nearly increased the means of modern warfare to the infinite. We're now in part 2, discussion of new methods of operations. So it's like, what was that quote from Mattis? Be polite to everybody and have a plan to kill everybody you meet.
Yeah.
So everything you see, every new thing that you think of, everything that comes across the news, every app that shows up on your phone, if you were a military theorist, you would think, how can that be a weapon? Because it already is. How is it a weapon? There, that'll keep you up all night. The electricity grid, how is that a weapon? The storm sewer system, how is that a weapon? Garbage pickup, how is that a weapon? I'm just looking around my room here and picking things that come to mind.
Let's say you have an engineering team that designs the B-2 bomber, or any given weapon you can think of. That costs X. But then it costs way, way, way more than X to actually get the thing to fly. What if you were a hostile actor and you just paid the team to figure out how to get the trash collection to be a weapon?
It's probably cheaper.
It's orders of magnitude cheaper and almost like indefendable. Like there's no Star Wars defense initiative for whatever. TikTok. All that just takes is resolve, to pull the plug on it and say, hey, you know what? Hey, no Chinese apps on your phone. We don't have any. Of that, though.
But TikTok's fun. I can watch pretty girls doing pretty girl things. I don't know. TikTok leaks. It leaks out of TikTok. I do not have TikTok, but they show up on Telegram. Yeah, Resolve is leaky.
I wrote here on page 112, given these views on Islamic terrorists, because he writes here about bin Laden, the bombings of embassies in Nairobi, other places, other actions that bin Laden had taken. This is before 9/11 of 2001.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote, given these views on Islamic terrorists, is it surprising we aren't more intolerant of them like China is? You know, everybody's like it's hot and cool right now to talk about China's treatment of Uyghurs,
Uyghurs?
Islamists in China.
The Chinese Muslims who live in the western part of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to talk about that, but hey, if this is your view of warfare, isn't what they're doing entirely consistent with that?
Sure. Yeah. Everything can be a weapon. Everything can be a weapon, including an ethnic minority in your country.
Especially one that has a long and storied past with it.
Yes. Gosh, this book is frustrating. Because you read it, you're like, there's no safe havens anywhere.
Page 113.
That's my reaction reading the whole book was,
Although there is still no one at present listing these immaculately dressed and dapper fellows in the ranks of terrorists, yet in terms of their actions and calamitous consequences they have caused in England, Mexico, and Southeast Asia, none of these types, such as the bandits and bin Laden, can even hold a candle to them. Taking the big financial crocodiles as represented by Soros, on the strength of a daily business volume exceeding $120 billion in floating capital, he used financial derivative methods as well as free economic regulations to repeatedly change his attitude and play tricks to foment trouble so as to bring about one financial upheaval after another. As a result, the area of harmed nations gradually enlarged from Southeast Asia to Russia and then to Japan and finally to Europe and the United States, which were watching from the sidelines, were also unable to escape by sheer luck, so that the existing world financial system and economic order were fundamentally shaken, and it had already become another new disaster threatening human society and international security. The typical characteristics of terrorism, including being transnational, concealed, without rules, and tremendously destructive, have given us reason to call it financial terrorism.
Yeah, except, on the other hand, what's the body count?
Well, it's the free market, bro. I mean, like derivatives and stuff. You know, he helps financial markets discover prices and exchange rates.
Market efficiency.
That's the fucking argument, Carl.
Yeah. Well, I was joking about the body count. The body count isn't as high necessarily.
It's not zero.
It's not zero. So what was it? 2,000? How many in the Twin Towers?
I don't know. 2,000, 3,000.
Something like that. It's like when we read Going Postal. Mr. Lipvig, you have killed 22.8 people.
Right.
I never killed anybody. Mr. Soros, you have killed. How high is it? Lives destroyed by his actions.
Have I told you the story about me standing in line in customs in Houston, thinking about that? Did I tell that in the Going Postal episode?
I think you did,
Yeah.
but you could tell it again.
I was standing in line in customs in Houston one time for 4 hours, and there had to have been 3,000 people in the room. I mean, it was shoulder to shoulder. It was those switchbacks between the stupid ropes, you know? And I was just like 4 hours times 3,000 people. It's just lives being destroyed, like in aggregate. They shouldn't have allowed us to leave the country or anyone else to come back in. Yeah.
Let's see. Look at 115.
Okay. Carl has 18 pages of notes.
I do. Well, we're just going to stop at some point. But you can learn from the terrorist. Say this line. However, we must also say that in this area being the new warfare, the new and old terrorists who consistently uphold the principle of resorting to every conceivable means are still the best teachers of each nation's government. If you want to learn how, you study the people that are successful. The people that are successful are the Bin Ladens and the Soroses and whoever shut down that pipeline.
Right.
By the way, I heard that it wasn't that they couldn't turn the pipelines on, it was that they couldn't run their billing software. They could have got the oil to the East Coast, but they couldn't have billed for it.
Everything here's about
They could have physically opened the pipeline.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is this book getting you down?
No, it's just what I already knew.
It's what I already knew, but hadn't really thought about and put it together. It's like Aristotle, you know, it's stuff that you already know, but then...
You recollect it when you read it?
Yeah. Well, he says it, and now you say, oh, that's obvious. And then you diss on Aristotle, but you didn't think of it quite like that until he told you.
I have often thought of myself and other other people and entities, that our strengths are often our weaknesses. My disagreeableness is both of those things. And I know that. I recognize that. Our Bill of Rights is a big fucking problem. It's a big national security problem. Separation of church and state means that, non-state terror actors can hide behind that veil and launder money and do all kinds of crazy things. The Second Amendment means that bad actors, and I'm not talking about people that are in handgun violence. I mean, like real life bad actors can have guns, et cetera, et cetera. Our strengths are always our weaknesses. And, that sort of contractual mindedness of the American plus its profit motive could potentially tell a ransomware group that they don't actually have to do anything to the pipeline. They just know that those stingy bastards that run that won't let any oil move if they can't bill for it.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have the pipeline if it wasn't for that profit motive. But yeah.
So it's a strength and a weakness.
Yeah, and not everybody views us the way we view ourselves, clearly. On page 120, they let us know that we have to be really careful. That these actors, these bad actors, have to be really careful, because only when blood or cruelty are added into the situation is it able to become severe or shocking. So, if you want, you can keep this unrestricted warfare sub-shocking, or you can make it real shocking, depending on what you need to do.
It makes me long for Christendom. And I know it wasn't perfect. They used to have these in the Middle Ages in Europe. Just in Europe, it didn't work anywhere else, but in Europe. Well, there's a lot of feast days on the medieval calendar. A lot. And you're not supposed to fight on feast days or Sundays. It's the peace of God or the truce of God. And the thing is, you read about this, it was kind of followed. You couldn't possibly do that. In other words, there were restrictions on warfare that people would actually follow. Well, because they shared one culture. And they all believed that they'd be in trouble if they broke the peace. They feared their own damnation if they broke the peace.
Some wishful thinking there.
Yeah, I know. Machiavelli talks about treaties, that you shouldn't keep them. You should only keep them as long as they're to your benefit. Yeah, that's what you do. In the old days, and in practice, I don't know how well this works, but if you do a treaty and say, so help me God, you might keep the treaty even when it wasn't to your benefit. But we've swept all of that away to the extent that it ever worked, and it kind of worked. To the extent that it ever worked, we've swept it all away, and what you're left with is the war of all against all with unlimited warfare and infinite means.
Yeah, well, people talk about the Christmas truce of 1916 or whatever it was. You've heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes it worked.
But it works when you share an overarching culture. It's like you're going to war against cousins, not against somebody completely different.
Yeah.
No gouging, no kicking the balls.
Right.
This is a friendly fight. They're just fighting.
Right. Supposing a war, page 122, supposing a war broke out between two developed nations already possessing full information technology and relying upon traditional methods of operation. The attacking side would generally employ the modes of great depth, wide front, high strength, and three-dimensionality to launch a campaign assault against the enemy. Their method does not go beyond satellite reconnaissance, electronic countermeasures, large-scale air attacks, plus precision attacks, outflanking, amphibious landings, airdrops behind enemy lines. The result is not that the enemy nation proclaims defeat, but rather one returns with one's spears and feathers. However, by using the combination method, a completely different scenario in-game can occur. If the attacking side secretly musters large amounts of capital without the enemy nation being aware of this at all, and launches a sneak attack against its financial markets, then, after causing a financial crisis, buries a computer virus and hacker detachment in the opponent's computer system in advance, while at the same time carrying out a network attack against the enemy so that the civilian electricity network, traffic dispatch network, financial transaction network, telephone communications network, and mass media networks are completely paralyzed, this will cause the enemy nation to fall into social panic, street riots, and a political crisis. There is finally the forceful bearing down by the army, and military means are utilized in gradual stages until the enemy is forced to sign a dishonorable peace treaty. So by the old way, there will be a counterattack. You might be overwhelming in your force, and the counterattack could potentially be weak, but there will be a counterattack. Under the new way, there may not and likely would not be a counterattack of any kind.
New way, less bloody, feels dirty somehow.
Yep.
Feels unsavory to me.
We just want a good death.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another consideration, but this kind of warfare steals the possibility of glory. Hey, I invented a computer virus. You can't brag about it. You're not going to get a medal.
No.
And stand up at a military parade with your medal for, what would it even look like, for hacking?
You just take a integrated circuit chip and just like stab all those little prongs into their chest. Page 154, the thrust of the book. Achieve objectives by means fair or foul. I mean, it's Machiavelli.
The necessary new method is to create a complete military Machiavelli. And our friend John is going to tell us Machiavelli is not the Machiavelli that you know. And he might be right, but I haven't read the book that he talks about that yet.
Getting a little weird. Yeah, maybe, kind of. They're in this 10,000 methods combined as one chapter. Page 156. Because of all these weird pressures and the unrestricted nature of warfare, that multinational, non-state, and supranational organizations together constitute an up-and-coming worldwide system of power.
Multinational corporations, trade associations, peace and environmental organizations, the Olympic Committee, religious organizations, terrorist organizations, small groups of hackers, etc. Well, let's take a few of those. Olympic Committee could be a vector in war, as the Olympics are coming up. Religious organizations, obviously. That means churches. Convince a church to change its doctrine in a way that's good for you.
Or how about this? Just bad for the church.
Sure.
Bad for your opponent ends up being potentially good for you.
Yeah.
Under this set of kind of rules. Now, where I come from, that's not how it works. And what there's no good in, there's harm in, Mother says.
Wait, what did your mother say?
What there's no good in, there is harm in.
Okay, and how does that map to this?
Well, here, like just harming your opponent, even though it might not actually render a good to you, is good. Like, to just hack in on, I don't know, Latvia's banking and just honk them all up would be good for you. Because everything is about power and interest and influence. So if you can mess up Latvia's banking, that makes your banking system more valuable. I mean, just on that basis alone.
Yep.
If you can do it quick enough and cheap enough, it just reduces the number of banking competitors in the world, and it's worth you doing. You don't even have to have a military interest or societal or any other kind of interest in Latvia. You just wreck them because that's just one less banking competitor. In this world of mutually penetrating political, economic, ideological, technical, and cultural influences with networks, clones, Hollywood, hot girls, internet pornography, and the World Cup easily bypassing territorial boundary markers, it is very hard to realize hopes of assuring security and pursuing interests in a purely national sense. Only a fool like Saddam Hussein would seek to fulfill his own wild ambition by outright territorial occupation. I believe these men. I believe that warfare is of an unrestricted nature now, and it is everywhere, and it is probably happening right now between multiple actors, and we are all playing a part or role in it that we may or may not be aware of. Have you looked at the prices of 2x4 studs lately? So, if that's the case, and if the results of this are as devastating as these guys say they are, or that they can be, and I think they are, then do we do this too? We, whoever that is, do we do this too? And can you win? I think it's like any other arms race. Once you start, the first actor wins. You hit Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you win. After that, you can't win an atomic war. I think this is just like atomic warfare. I don't think it's possible to win. Like, we're reading this book from 1999. The United States is somehow doing these sorts of things around the world. And maybe was in 1999. It's not like we're not doing this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not like we haven't, fomented color revolutions all over the world and done all kinds of things like this.
I'm not sure we're competent enough or unified enough to actually have a coherent strategy in this kind of warfare. I don't know that you could when you have the potential for regime change every 4 years.
Right. Well, let's say that there is an agency called the BIA,
Alleged regime change,
that has continuity and so on. We're trying. Would be my guess that there are people trying within our government to do these sorts of things. I think that the first actor probably has a high likelihood of success, and then as more and more actors get into this, like, it's just going to be an enormous drag on what Sam Harris would call human flourishing. Like, markets are going to be continually being messed with, power grids continually messed with, cultures continually being messed with, the moral fiber and dopamine of the subjects of every country and every land is going to be continually messed with. So what do you do next?
So the margin gets smaller and smaller. The marginal benefit gets smaller and smaller as time goes on.
Yeah. We have honeybees. And one of the big problems with honeybees is the varroa mite. And these mites just like grab onto these bees and just suck on them, just suck their juices out of them. And if the population, gets high enough, it's just such a drain on the bees' resources that the hive will fail. Like, if enough people are doing this, like, every nation in the world are just going to be just the drag on them culturally, economically, just in every way. Will just render everybody's lives just miserable and grinding and useless. If I'm right about that, and I think I am. There are 140 countries, let's say, in the world. I don't know. How many of them can you attack in your country? How many can China attack? I don't know. Let's say China's the best at this. 10? 20? 40? There are 100 more left that can be attacking China. This might's just creating a financial, economic, spiritual drag on these countries.
Except there's a force multiplier. If you're doing all the manufacturing for the world, I think you have a better chance at this. I don't think Latvia's
you're right.
going to do much to China. Made in Latvia? I haven't seen that. I'm sure they make stuff.
Well, you're right. So China has the other thing. This goes to my point. This is not an arms race that you can win if you're not the first actor. I don't think it's an arms race you can win. You can't win a nuclear arms race. I don't think you can win this arms race. This is just as devastating as that. I don't think it can be won. The only thing you can do is air gap your country.
Yeah, so an air gap is your computer's off the internet. Has an air gap.
Yeah, if you want true computer security, the computer has to be air gapped. You have to take a hot glue gun, fill up all the USB ports, no Wi-Fi card. No, that's what we used to do. I mean, you can't let people hook a USB drive to it. You can't hook it to the internet. It's got to be in a room, an isolated room. That's the only way you can keep it clean, and maybe not then. So you have to air gap your country. You can't expose your financial systems, your pipelines, your culture, you cannot expose them to non-national interest. You can't do it, because if you do, you're going to lose. The varroa mite of unrestricted warfare will infect the hive. Somebody eats a bat somewhere.
It wasn't a bat.
A pangolin.
It wasn't a pangolin either. All right, no.
You know what I'm saying.
So you, dear listener, you can look in recent history and see possible examples of this having been done. This might sound like right-wing, wingnut stuff. I don't know what I am anymore. But an American president declares a trade war. A disease comes from the country with whom he declared the war, spreads through the world, economy of said country is destroyed, president is gone. Was that an act of war?
It's all coincidences.
Maybe, right? It fits the book, doesn't it? It sure helped the interests of that other country, whether it's a coincidence or not.
So what you're saying...
It's the sort of thing you would have done if you'd read this book, is what I'm saying. Whether it was actually done, I don't know. But it's the sort of thing you would have done. If I can, through illness, they even mention that in the book. If I can, through illness, take down my enemy and compel them to do what I want, get rid of the tariffs or whatever, victory.
They mention illness. They mention hot girls. Yeah. So what you're saying, Karl, is Nixon should never have went and petted that panda.
Did he pet a panda?
Oh, yeah.
I hate pandas.
Yeah, they're not real.
They don't breed.
No, they're not real. They're like koi fish, like koi. It's some weird, genetically, like some weird inbred.
So that would need to be the next episode of Kung Fu Panda.
It's some weird project.
Poe tries to get a date and to make little pandas and can't.
I like it. Yeah, so, I mean, if this is true, if warfare is unrestricted, and if there are multiple actors and supranational actors like they say there are, and I think it's right, I think it's true, then your only alternative, really, is to air gap and then force them to take like a traditional military action if they wanted to impose will.
Well, go back to the beginning of the show and, ask that DuckDuckGo question. Can you use TikTok in China? So could we, Scott, make an app, a subversive app to destroy the morals of Chinese youth?
They won't let you do it.
They won't let you do it because they know they've done it to you. Once you learn that flying crane kick, the other guy can't use the flying crane on you because you already know it. I don't know. We watched a movie last night. We watched Drunken Master, a silly Jackie Chan, very early Jackie Chan movie where he learns the 8 drunken gods method of Kung Fu. And he has to drink while he's doing it. And there's all these, in order to beat Thunderleg, I think is the bad guy's name.
Jackie Chan's an op. All right.
Movies are fun. But it's because he has, once you know the method, you can defend against it. So the key is to be first with your new Kung Fu style.
Right. Oh, well, there's another depressing online Great Books podcast.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. There's some weirdness in the middle about the golden mean and some mystical aesthetic warfare considerations, which I didn't get.
That part's dumb. But there's some interesting stuff here, and it almost certainly has to be true. Go to onlinegreatbooks.com. Go buy an Outlaws t-shirt there, or go join us. We'll be opening enrollment very, very soon, and you can go read Aristotle, talk about politics and ethics, and then maybe get a little Aquinas later and figure out what's the best way to use this stuff, which might be none. Is it better to be harmed or not be harmed, or to do harm, Karl?
Socrates says it's better to be harmed.
Yeah, air gap. That's the
It's hard to believe, though. Yeah, air gapping. Well, maybe you can't do it on a national scale, dear listener, not being national leaders, but you might be able to air gap yourself a bit and defend your mind a bit, disengage from the stuff everyone else is doing. And if you want to re-engage and keep your intellectual life, you can come to us.
I got to go pee. Wrap it up.
So come join us and tend your inner life, and maybe you'll be a little bit more defended against this sort of warfare, which is almost certainly happening. All right, so that's another Online Great Books podcast, and we'll see you next time.
I couldn't do it anymore. Ah,